Good afternoon, my friends. The official Yiddish greeting is Shalom Aleichem, Aleichem Shalom. This is the right crowd for this event. Wonderful. My name is Lisa Roy, and I am the manager of community building and cultural enrichment here at the Miles Nadal Jewish Community Center, which is located in downtown Toronto. It is my honor to officially welcome all of you to the 2025 Canadian Jewish Literary Awards. It is wonderful seeing so many familiar faces in our sold-out audience. A special welcome if you are joining us for the first time or for the first time in a long time. And I would like to extend a warm hello to our at-home audience. I'm going to ask everyone to kindly take a moment and please turn your cell phones to vibrate or to off so that we do not disturb this afternoon's ceremony. Ashenem Dank, thank you very much for doing that. While we are doing that, I am going to extend my heartfelt thank you to my wonderful JCC colleagues who have been working so hard. Technical Director Peter Fellhaber, Al Green Theater Technician Tiffany Yaw, who is up in our booth, Deanna DiLello, Esther Arbid, Maxine Bailey, and our wonderful front of house staff, Daniel, Cooper, Amy, and Brian. Traditionally named Turtle Island, some thousands of years ago, the land upon which our community center sits is appropriately known as the gathering place in the dish with one spoon territory. Spadina, which is derived from the Anishinaabe word Ishpadina, meaning going up the hill, is the name of an ancient indigenous trail. We are grateful for the opportunity to live, work, meet, and learn on this territory. May we aspire to learn more about the indigenous people's history, as it is forever intertwined with our own. For those of you who read the Yiddish foreword, the Vorwort, I read something in an article recently that resonated with me. It stated that we must pay attention to the current war that is being waged on literature, language, and culture, and to remember always that Jewish history is full of examples of what attacking books and those who write them can lead to. As such, in these turbulent times fraught with rampant global anti-Semitism, including book banning, author profiling, literary boycotts, attacks on Jewish bookstores, censorship, and journalistic bias and omissions, it is incumbent upon all of us to take the time to celebrate, read, and study Jewish-themed literature to ensure that our roots, languages, and history are kept alive, relevant, and always part of the conversation. And now, it gives me very great pleasure to introduce Edward Toprunsky, Chair of the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards, to say a few words and officially open today's event.
Hineni, here we are, Resignen Do. We made it. This is a full house. And thank you for coming, very much for coming. All of you that care about Jewish literature. It's just great. This is the 11th year for the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards. It's the second year that we're in partnership with the Miles Nadal JCC and here at the beautiful Al Green Theatre. I want to thank Lisa Roy and her team for making us all feel welcome and for the work they put in to make this all happen so wonderfully. The Canadian Jewish Literary Awards has always been free to attend, and we like it to always be free for everybody. We rely on donations and support from our communities to keep it free. I do want to acknowledge our donors, our benefactors, our supporters, and the members of the community who have helped us through the years. Jerry Sheff and Shanitha Kethan have been our patrons since we started. Because of their generosity, we've been able to sustain the awards program and keep it free. They're keeping us alive. We found a new partner at the Anne Tannenbaum Center for Jewish Studies at the University of Toronto. Anna Schneersis, director of the Anne Tannenbaum Center for Jewish Studies, welcomed us and gave us a home and an address, and we are grateful. It's a perfect partnership because our goals and our values and their values are so closely aligned. With these awards, we're doing our best to come together as a community and share the values and creativity that define us, affirming life and hope. The Canadian Jewish Literary Awards and the Anne Tannenbaum Center for Jewish Studies contribute to the health of that communal culture by promoting Jewish ideas, Jewish creativity, and Jewish scholarship. The Anne Tannenbaum Center gives us the opportunity to offer charitable receipts for our donors. This was a challenging year, and I would invite you, if you are so inclined, and if you see the value of supporting Canadian Jewish literature, to visit our website, www.cjl Awards, to make a donation, and you will get a charitable receipt from the Anne Tannenbaum Center. And now I'd like to introduce Anna Schneersis, the director of the Anne Tannenbaum Center for Jewish Studies, to say a few words.
Thank you, Ed. Hi, everyone. My name is Anna Schneersis. I'm the director of the Anne Tannenbaum Center for Jewish Studies at the University of Toronto, and I am very excited to extend warm congratulations to the winners of this 2025 Canadian Jewish Literary Awards. Our center is the largest hub of Jewish studies in Canada, and sometimes we'll say in North America, with 86 graduate students pursuing degrees in Jewish studies, over 65 professors researching and teaching courses in all areas of Jewish studies, ranging from Jewish literature to Jewish art to ancient Judaism, Hebrew, Yiddish language, history of the Holocaust, and more. We're very excited to be connected with the Jewish community of Toronto through public events and the numerous activities that bring together our faculty, our students, and the larger Toronto community in pursuing of knowledge in Jewish studies. So when last year at Trapunsky approached me and said, well, let's work together on this event, I was very excited. And I got to see the glimpse into this wonderful initiative. As Ed said, we provided the home, and what it meant that the books submitted for the prize arrived to my office, and I got to look at the titles. And I was astonished at the quality of submissions. Top-rate authors in Jewish studies, fiction, Yiddish, Holocaust history, scholarship, many literature categories. It was indeed an intellectual feast, a privilege to think of the intellectual rigor, depth, and excitement that these books bring to the Jewish community, to the Canadian society at large, and of course to us individuals who rely on these incredible authors to provide insight and inspire us. I cannot but help to note that many winners of this year's prize have strong connection to the Anne Tannenbaum Center for Jewish Studies, either as professors, as my colleague here, Anne Kamarami, or as speakers. We're going to host Ayelet Tsabari literally in a few days. And of course, Kear and Levine, and Anna Miransky, and Simon Rabinovitch, whose work we've been assigning to our courses for years. So I take pride and joy in your success, And congratulations to all our winners. And thank you, Ed, again. And I'm very much looking forward to the ceremony today. Mazel tov.
Thank you so much, Anna. Honoring the best Jewish books of the year allows us to better understand ourselves and our collective past, our shared present, and the uncertain world of our future. It recognizes and rewards the finest Jewish writings on subjects with Jewish themes and acknowledges the authors who provide comfort during difficult times and more joyous ones. Culture is a major measure of the vibrancy of Jewish life in Canada. If I could borrow a thought from the women's suffragist movement of the early 20th century, give us bread and give us roses. Bread is the home, shelter, and security, and the roses of life are music and books. More than ever, we need bread and roses. Bread is food for the body, but books are food for the mind. The 9 remarkable writers you will meet today, talking about their exceptional books, are the roses. Because of the freeze on publishing Jewish writers or books with Jewish themes, we thought it would be a challenge this year to find worthwhile books. It wasn't. More books were submitted this year than ever before. The Canadian Jewish Literary Awards had so many good submissions this year that the jury was hard-pressed to decide. But we discussed, we debated, and we persevered. And we've chosen these 9 outstanding books for 2025. The depth and the breadth of the books we considered shows the vibrancy of the culture and the appeal of Jewish themes for fiction and non-fiction writers. With the cash value of the prizes we're giving out this afternoon is significant for the writers. It's the reputation and standing of this jury that underscores its importance. I'd like to quickly introduce the distinguished jury who worked so hard. Rona Rado is an award-winning author of 15 children's and youth books. Mark Schreiman holds a PhD in modern thought and literature and taught at the University of Toronto. He's the past president of the Canadian Jewish Congress, and as a lawyer, he was the Deputy Attorney General for Ontario. Anna Porter is one of Canada's most notable publishers and editors. She founded Key Porter Books. She's the author of 5 novels and 5 non-fiction books, including Kazler's Train, which won a Canadian Jewish Book Award. Alan Goldschlager is Professor Emeritus at Western University, where he founded the Holocaust Literature Research Institute. He's not with us today because he's in Europe meeting his daughter's future in-laws for the very first time. Sadra Rabinovitch is the founding producer of the acclaimed CBC radio literary program, Writers and Company, with host Eleanor Rochdell. She fell and broke her hip last week, and she's in rehabilitation at Bridgepoint Hospital. Andrew Cohen is a best-selling author, an award-winning journalist, an associate professor of journalism at Carleton University in Ottawa. He caught COVID last week, so talk about challenges, and we wish them all well. Adam Furstenberg began the Canadian Jewish Book Awards, the forerunner of the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards, 36 years ago in 1989. He joined us as part of the founding team of the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards to keep the spirit going. May his memory be for a blessing. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Rona Rado, who will present the first of the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards.
It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a very exciting opportunity for me to meet and mingle with some of the top wonderful Jewish writers I've gotten to know. So today's winner for children and youth is The Light Keeper by Second Story Press, written by Sheila Baslaw and Karen Levine. It's a story of light, both physical and metaphorical. The story's based on tales Sheila Baslaw's father told her about life. I should put my glasses on so I can read this. Life in Perilla, shtetl near Kiev. Told from a child's perspective, their themes, overcoming fears, family responsibility, and the importance of community are universal. With co-author Karen Levine, the author of Hannah's Suitcase, Baslaw, who is 92, is passing the stories on to the next generation. The atmospheric illustrations rendered in sepia and earth tones, which really reference the shtetl by Toronto artist Alice Priestley, enrich a tale that touches the heart as it illuminates a chapter of our collective past. And now I would like to welcome to the stage our two authors and illustrator, Karen, Sheila, and Alice. And yes, it's my pleasure. I want to give you, each one of you.
Thank you, everybody, for coming today. The three of us are very, very honored to be here and to accept this award. We thank the jury very much, and we thank all the wonderful women at Second Story Press, especially Margie Wolf and Fawn Trong, for making this happen. Yes, I agree. As you heard, ours is a story of light in dark times, and we all need light right now. The Lightkeeper tells the story of a young boy, Shmuel, who lives in a shtetl in Russia. He wants to help his poor and hungry family, but no one wants to hire a 10-year-old kid. When the miracle of electric light comes to the town for the first time, his curiosity and knowledge mean that he's the only person who can help keep the lights shining. And to do that, he has to conquer a terrible fear. There is a wonderful result. Not to worry. He is transformed, the community is transformed, and his desperate family gets the help it needs. It's a story about problem-solving, risk-taking, the thrill of accomplishment, of personal and community transformation, and of the power of light to give us comfort and hope and to make us feel less alone. I feel more strongly than ever about telling both tough and gentle Jewish stories. These are very hard times for Jews and very hard times for the world. And more than ever, I think we need to remember where we come from, the values of community and of caring for the stranger, of standing against injustice, of speaking out, and about holding light against the darkness, not just for our own people, but for all who suffer, all innocents. Like Shmuel, my co-author Sheila is someone who never gives up. He was 10, but she's actually 93. And like the light that shone in the shtetl square, she's a little bit dazzling. And here she is.
Thank you, Karen. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed jurors and fellow writers, and a special welcome to friends and family who are here for me today. I'm thrilled to have been recognized by the Canadian Jewish Literary Award for Youth. I'm in awe of the other winners and grateful to the renowned jurors who selected The Lightkeeper, my father Shmuel's story. Thanks to my co-writer Karen Levine for her talent with words and her rich imagination, which she brought to Shmuel's story. Thanks to Margie Wolf at Second Story Press, who saw a spark in The Lightkeeper and ran with it. And thanks to Alice Priestley, who brought this story to life on the page. So many people, Alice, have commented that you visually captured a moment in time. My father was not interested in talking about his childhood in Russia. He would say, they were terrible times. We did not have enough to eat. There were pogroms, and anti-Semitism. But to a child, this made my father's story more of a mystery and more interesting. Shmuel's story comes from my father's life. When I read this story to grades 3 and 4 children in the public schools, the children relate to Shmuel's world of poverty, his love of family, and his fight to conquer his fear of heights. At a time in our society when anti-Semitism is on the rise, I'm happy that children hear these universal themes through Shmuel's world. In this story, the fact that Shmuel is Jewish is secondary. The message that comes across is that we Jews are just like everyone else. We live in incredible times when you can be old and still look forward to taking on new challenges. At my readings, I tell the children, I'm 93 years old, and this is my first book. I encourage them to dream big about their futures, and I tell them to never, never give up on their dreams. It takes the shtetl to write and publish a story. I'm grateful to my family, friends, my writing group, the Scribbling Sisters, Karen and Alice, Margie Wolf, and her of the person that's now taking over from Margie, Pam Traub, and all the dedicated people at Second Story Press. Together they make up what I like to call Team Shmuel. Thank you for bringing me to this delicious moment. I'm deeply grateful for this incredible honor.
And Gala. Seabirds. Hope I can read my notes. I, like Karen and Sheila, I am absolutely thrilled that the Lightkeeper is receiving this wonderful recognition. Thank you so much to Ronan and the jurors and all the supporters of this award. I also want to say thank you to Second Story Press for inviting me to create the artwork for this story, and to Sheila and Karen for such a lovely story, so beautifully told. I'd like to share something I noticed while I was working on the illustrations. I found myself thinking about light as if it were one of the characters in the story. From the stub of candle that Shmuel lights in the darkness before dawn, and the delicate first light of morning when he arrives in the square to fetch water, to the dim lantern light when everyone in the shtetl has assembled to see the street lamps turned on for the first time, and then that sudden dazzling sun in the night of the electric lights greeted with cheers and singing and dancing. The role light plays is practical and useful, but it's also a role of hope and possibility and joy. It's an important role, as it shows us the importance of Shmuel's role as the light keeper. So I have one more thank you to add, and that's to Shmuel and all the light keepers of the world. Thank you.
Wow, I get to introduce two amazing authors. I'm delighted to introduce Ruth Rifka, the winner of the Poetry Award, her book, To All the Mirror Doors of a Beginning, a Journey Ending. Ruth, it's a collection of poems driven by passion and urgency. Under her full name, Ruth Rifka Abrams, she is a well-known visual artist and expressionist painter. With advanced age has come the need for words. As well, in the poem titled, In My 96th Year, she begins, I am obsessed to search out the truth of all things, to see the pleasure clear before I go, as go I must. With startling honesty and directness, Ruth wrestles with questions of morality, mortality, and belief, responding to painful current events and the rise of anti-Semitism. I'm delighted to introduce Ruth Rifka, our winner this year in poetry.
I want to thank you, all of you, who are so deeply involved in keeping Jewish literature alive in this time when virulent Jew hate swamps the planet. I don't have to tell you about that. I am truly honored by this award, and believe me, suitably humbled to find myself in such stellar company. Thank you, all of you who have come out for me this afternoon, and to all my mentors who are out there. I never imagined in my 96th year to become a kind of war poet while facing down mortality and searching for answers. This book begins with the shock of October 7 and stops at the 7th month of the war. Today, I have chosen poems to read that try to transcend this heavy subject. 2 months into the war, my husband died. This is dedicated to him, to my first and lifelong mentor. Lou, I held your hand and felt your comfort of me as you were leaving. Your sudden strength gave me courage as I tried to ease you over into that place where I'm not sure we will ever again meet. You were my friend until that very moment when you knew death was coming for you. That's my last memory of you, that somehow I gave you power to depart, perhaps gave you one last moment of happiness. Now I am the last of the last, speaking to all my dead. Since they can no longer speak to me, I shall enter their silence. And so I speak to myself. The dead are dead. I am still alive, far from deathbed words, and yet close. Let this be a prayer, a guiding protection for all those I will leave behind. Let my heart, my soul, be this pressing hand blessing you forever. Amen. I wrote the second poem quite a bit of time before the living hostages were released. Old age must live with not knowing. The end of the novel started, the outcome of this cursed war, who your great-grandchildren will become, if and how the world will fall apart in global warming, Earth blood-soaked or nuclear-bombed. Anyway, you'll be gone. Every night know this for sure. A visit from the angel of death is reasonable expectation. Here and now arrives this final time to think about goodbyes, plus giving a paean of thanks for whatever ordained and sustained us this time around, supposing we were here before. If not, then our last time ever, seeing as there won't be anything more. Is it so terrible to die? Billions of times before in this divine sensorium of existence, of absolute wonder and thudding horror, this dance of life and death and consciousness extinguished has happened before. Is there more? At the end, do we find out why something is instead of nothing, and what our purpose signified, why we lived, why we died, why we hoped, why we were, why we loved, only to lose it all. The only thing I know for sure right now, my story ends. I can only hope death smiles kind for me here in my good luck of stubborn age, where I live on, while the young died brave, and some live caged in the same Hamas hell, where their enemy rots in ruins. Let me live to reach the day when all the young are free and reckless in their hopes, a day perhaps of any kind of peace, the end of this war and everyone's children singing, and that will be enough. My last poem is for everyone's children. I wrote it as a coda to a bitter story unfolding, and perhaps we still unfolding. Parting blessings as I leave. May the truth and beauty of your childhood soul follow and be with you all the days of a long life full of purpose, meaning, and true love, under the canopy of God's benevolent presence. May you wake up from dreams that connect you to your truest self. May you be blessed to meet and be joined in long, happy companionship with your fated chosen one. May you exult in good health and in the knowledge of how to maintain your body. May you be blessed with abundance to share. May you turn challenges into victories. May every loss be softened with the ongoing love of a company of dear ones. May you be blessed by fate. May you keep a compassionate heart and have the luck to meet equally compassionate souls in your life journey. May you learn wondrous things. May you never stop studying the miracles of this existence. May you never be lonely for long. May you be blessed with many friends and be counted as a true friend. May you relish your own company and solitude. May you be fortunate enough to achieve discernment and understanding through teachers and become a preceptor yourself of higher truths. May you be true to your truest self. Thank you.
Hi. As you heard earlier, I'm a recovering book publisher, and I've written, I think, 13 books so far. Isn't that? Geez, you got to do something. Anyway, I'm on the jury for this year's various awards, and it was a great experience to be on the jury because there was so much to read that was so good. And I didn't expect there to be so many wonderful books. It's very encouraging. Anyway, I'm here to present, and I'm hoping that somewhere up there's a way to show Ayelet Tsabari, whose book, Songs for the Brokenhearted, is the winner of this year's fiction award. It's already won an award in the United States, and in fact, I was reading an interview with her in the New York Times that said, "I come from a long line of house cleaners. After October 7, I knew exactly what to do." The novel is set in the complex history of Yemeni Jewish diaspora, refugees from Arab countries, and its broken heart. It is a novel about love and loss and about finding a new way forward.
Hello, everyone. I am honored and thrilled to be the recipient of the Canadian Jewish Literary Award for Fiction. I'm so sad to be missing the ceremony, especially since I'm going to be standing on this very stage exactly a week from today to celebrate the beginning of Mizrahi Heritage Month. But such is life. When I moved to Canada nearly 30 years ago, I couldn't have imagined how much this place would change my life. It is where I started writing in English, where I met my partner, where I gave birth to my child, and where I began my career as an author. And still, after moving back home to Tel Aviv to be with my family, I feel a strong bond with this place and its people. and I am so moved that you include me and honor my work with this award. I have said dramatically before, because I'm a writer, that Songs for the Brokenhearted feels like the novel I was born to write. I wrote this book as a love song to my Jewish Yemeni community in Israel. It takes place in the Yemeni neighborhood where my family comes from, and it is steeped in the sounds and smells and sights of my childhood visits to my grandmother's. As a girl growing up in Israel, a girl who dreamt of becoming an author, I never read stories that featured Yemeni characters, and I've never seen myself or my family represented in literature. And as it is often the case, the dearth of stories was even more glaring when it came to women. In Yemen, the women were illiterate. And as I began delving into Yemeni culture and history, I learned that singing was their way of telling stories. It was their way of sharing, of being creative, of owning their narrative. That made perfect sense to me. I always sang. Singing was a big part of our lives as Yemeni Israelis. So my discovery of the women's songs not only gave me a sense of where my novel was going, but also led to a huge personal epiphany. I used to envy my Ashkenazi friends for their literary heritage. Now I realized I had one too, and it was rich and feminine and beautiful, and it was mine. I discovered a pantheon of illiterate Yemeni poetesses whose shoulders I am standing on. And it became my goal to celebrate and honor them. By writing this book, by including their songs, my own writing became a part of this tradition that was carried through generations and across countries. I became a part of the dissemination and a part of the act of passing it on. I cannot speak of this book without mentioning that it takes place during 1995. It is set against the Oslo Accords, a time of great turmoil, but maybe greater hope for both Israelis and Palestinians. Sadly, this scenario looks so far away nowadays, and the title perhaps more relatable than ever. I would like to take this opportunity to say, despite how naive it may sound to some, maybe to many, that I still hold on to that hope that the Oslo Accords introduced, to the belief that coexistence is possible and necessary and maybe the only way. And I refuse to let go of it, despite how broken my heart may be. I want to thank my editors, and especially the inimitable Jennifer Lambert, who is accepting the award on my behalf today, and who won an award herself this week, Professional Association of Canadian Literary Agents Person of the Year Award. Thank you for everything, for your guidance and for your support and for your friendship. I also want to thank the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards for your ongoing support of me and of Jewish authors, and for selecting Songs for the Brokenhearted. And I share this award with the incredible women who've inspired me in writing this novel, the women in my family, the women who shared their stories with me during my research, who cried with me and sang with me, and the unknown Yemeni poetesses whose voices and stories are threaded throughout this novel. This award is also for them. Thank you again for this incredible honor. I'm so grateful. Yagub, Immigrant Camp, Machane Olim Rosh Ha'ain, 1950. Years later, when they are old, sitting on a porch somewhere overlooking the sea, someone would ask them how it all started, and he'd say, as soon as he saw her on the other side of the drinking fountain at the immigrant camp, he knew. The air smelled of citrus, a sweet, tangy scent Yaqub had until then associated with Israel, because when they got off the planes, it flooded his nostrils. But from that moment on, it was her it evoked. He was washing his hands before dinner. She was scrubbing dishes, using sand in lieu of dish soap, her face round and open, her eyes long-lashed and lined with kohl. She was dressed in a buttoned floral dress and a red cardigan. In the camp, they were all given used winter clothes that looked nothing like the traditional clothing they left behind in Yemen. Shoes, too, which they slipped onto their calloused, untrained feet accustomed to cracked earth and soft sand and rugged rocks. They looked up at the same time and their eyes met. And it was as though his heart stopped, or he was struck by lightning, or some other terrible cliche he'd feel embarrassed by as soon as it crossed his lips. He tried to rewrite it and fail, because, of course, rewriting only works on paper. Still, he'd do his best. He'd gaze up at the sky, eyes squinted in concentration to the delight of the listeners on the porch, and he'd say it was like everyone else vanished from the camp. And all the other smells that permeated the air, sewage and sweat and mildew and rotten garbage, evaporated. And all that was left was the scent of oranges and the two of them, looking at each other over a two-sided, rusty water fountain. She blushed and looked away. Someone behind Yaqub nudged him, urging him to stop hugging the tap, and he walked away from her gaze and her smile. When he looked back, so did she. No, I didn't, Saida would argue. I would never. But this is how he remembered it. Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. So yes, I am Jennifer Lambert. I'm the editor-in-chief at HarperCollins Canada. And of course, it was my great honor to work with Ayelet and to be here on her behalf. She and I have worked together over all of her award-winning books. So she's not only an accomplished fiction writer, her short story collection won the Sammy Rohr Prize for Jewish Literature some time ago, but also her moving and stirring memoir, The Art of Leaving, was shortlisted for the Hilary Weston Prize for Nonfiction and won the Canadian Jewish Literary Award. So it's quite astonishing and astounding to say that this novel, The Songs for the Brokenhearted, is her debut novel, which in fact it is. And what's even more astounding is the novel itself, which places her, in my view, among the top writers of her generation. As you've heard from Ayelet, and no one speaks more eloquently than her about her work, Songs for the Brokenhearted is set in Israel in two time periods. In 1950 in a Yemeni immigrant camp, and in 1995 in the weeks leading up to the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin. It carries within it both cultural and political history. But as Ayelet described, it's also the story of a Yemeni-Israeli family and a love story. In her skillful hands, we explore mother-daughter relationships, the obligations of marriage, the profound effects of grieving lost parents and lost children, the lure of fringe politics and belonging to young men, and finally the beautiful gift of a young woman connecting with her own heritage through the songs and poetry of Yemeni women. This novel is a towering achievement, written with love for a people and a place and with a clear-eyed view of history, and in it a palpable connection to today. I'm deeply thankful on behalf of HarperCollins for the recognition of this book and this author by these awards. One further word about Ayelet herself, though of course you saw that on the screen, a warmer, more curious, more dedicated and generous writer in person you could not hope to meet. So while I'm sorry she's not here today, I'm thrilled that she will be in Toronto for a set of events this coming week, which we've heard mentioned on October 30th at the Anne Tannenbaum Centre, and then here at the JCC on November 1st in an event featuring live music, art, and a reading by Ayelet. I hope we'll see you there. Thank you again to the jury and to the awards.
Hello again. I'm presenting this award on behalf of Andrew Cohen, who, as I told you before, is suffering from COVID and couldn't be here today. This is an important award for us. It's the only named award that we have. We named it after Irving Abella, and it was important for Andrew to present it because he was a friend of Irving Abella and of Rosie Abella. And what I'd like to do is, with your indulgence, is really read what he wrote as the introduction to this award. The award is for Sovereignty and Religious Freedom, a Jewish History, and it's by Simon Rabinovitch.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to the jury, to the awards. And thank you so much to whoever put that very young picture of me up there. I really appreciate that. This is a really wonderful program, and I feel really honored to be among a lot of really wonderful authors and to learn about their work. I feel especially honored to win this award named after Irving Abella. When I was an undergraduate at McGill University, where I first became interested in Jewish history, I would say to many people's surprise, including my parents and especially my girlfriend at the time, who's now my wife, Irving Abella was one of these names that had giant stature. There were not very many people who were writing about Canadian Jewish history. I remember at the time the other was a professor named Gerald Tolchinsky, but really these two people were the only people who were writing about Canadian Jewish history, and this book, None is Too Many, was a real landmark and a book that I read and was familiar with. And at that time, professors, when I didn't yet know that professor was like a job, these were just sort of disembodied names, right? That you heard about but didn't think about as being people. And so, first of all, to meet Professor Abella's wife, Rosie, which I had a chance to do in the spring, was absolutely wonderful. And now to win this award named after him is something that I couldn't have conceived of as an undergraduate. Partly because, everybody thought I was going to law school. And then I realized that this was actually a job, and that's something I might want to try out. So I did, and it worked out. And I guess I'll explain a bit of the context for the book, and then come back to my thank you. So the book, there was a wonderful introduction that was given. It fits into the sort of arc of my scholarship and my career, which has been about trying to understand the different ways that Jews have conceived of themselves as a people, politically, socially, and culturally, in ways that maybe don't fit necessarily into what we see as being a sort of binary between political sovereignty through a nation state and individual rights and integration outside of the nation state. I've looked at different ways that have challenged that. And this latest project, I looked to the law, and I found all sorts of cases where Jews were fighting with other Jews in civil courts that weren't Jewish courts about which took precedent, essentially the right of the group or the right of the individual. And that was a lot of fun and a lot of interesting work for me, but it also brought me back full circle to the people I have to thank. So both of my parents were practicing lawyers, and my mother's here today, which I'm very thankful for. And I'm also a little bit sad that my father couldn't be here today. The book was dedicated to his memory. He was a practicing lawyer in Toronto for decades, and before that, he grew up in Outremont in Quebec, which is the site of a significant portion of the book, where I look at some relevant cases there. So I think he would be very happy and very surprised about this award, I wish he was here, but I thank him anyway, and my mom and my wife and kids who are at home in Boston, and the jury and everybody here. Thank you very much.
Now I'd like to talk a little bit about John Lawrence, who's going to come up and talk, I hope, a lot more about his book. I have two confessions to make. I think to start with, one is that I had read and liked, actually more than just liked, John's book, No Jews Live Here, long before it came up for consideration by the jury for the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards. It's an evocative, deeply felt family history interwoven with the tragedies of the 20th and 21st centuries in Hungary. It is universal in its themes and its portrayal of John's formidable grandmother. I have known women like that, John. And I just thought that it was a riveting read, and I'm recommending it to anybody. I've actually brought a copy with me. But there are more copies available in bookstores. I just want to reassure you of that. My second confession is that both John and I come from the same basic geographical place, that being Hungary. And his parents were 56ers, as was my mother, and in fact was I as a kid. And now, John, if you could come up here, while you make your way up, I'll just mention that John is a journalist, and you've probably read his columns and stories in the newspaper, and he's an author of several books. Dream Cities, The Pursuit of Urban Utopias, won the Vasily Prize for Public Policy, and it was also shortlisted for the Donner. So John comes to this award as a previous winner. I'd like to welcome him to the stage.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Anna, for that very generous introduction. So I'd like to thank the jurors and the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards for this great honor. It's very meaningful to me. And it's wonderful to be here with all the other esteemed authors who've won prizes this year. I'd also like to thank my publisher, Alana Wilcox, who's in the audience somewhere, and said yes to a kind of an improbable book, which is actually explicitly not included in Coach House Books' list of types of books to publish, which is to say memoirs. I'd also like to thank my wife, Victoria Foote, who's also here somewhere, who gave the manuscript a vigorous reading and posed some really important and difficult questions that most of the answers are incorporated in the text. Not all, but most of them. So I'd like to, if whoever's working this slideshow could pull up the next picture. There. So this book is about many different things. And it's about topics I don't normally write about. If any of you have read my writing, I'm a reporter. I cover municipal politics and the antics of local politicians and real estate and planning and development. I don't normally write about stuff as close to this, as close to myself as this book. And I don't normally use the first person in my writing. So this was kind of a departure, but it's a book that has been kicking around in my head for a long time, because it's about stories that I grew up with and I was immersed in, because that was the world I lived in. I was born in North Toronto in 1963, but my parents were Hungarian refugees who came in 1956. Many of their friends were the same. We ate a lot of Hungarian food. We went to, all the Hungarian joints along here, along Bloor Street for schnitzel and for Dobostort. So this is a topic that is close to my heart. The book is about many different things. It was actually quite challenging for the publisher to come up with a blurb for the back cover. But it, looks at the sort of trajectory of Hungarian Jews, especially those who ended up in Budapest, before World War II, what happened to them during World War II, which is not such a well-known story in the annals of, popular knowledge about the Holocaust. And then what happened after the war during the communist times and then through exile after 1956 and the Hungarian Revolution. I talk about my father's experiences in a forced labor camp, the way my parents met, improbably over an autopsy because my father asked my mother out. He was a pathologist working at the university in Budapest, and she was applying for a job, and he hit on her just before he went and did an autopsy. So the book has lots of elements to it, but the main sort of the germ of the idea and the core of the book is this lady here, who is my maternal grandmother, and her name is Ilona Barta. That's the name that I knew her as. Ilona is the Hungarian name for Helen. Barta was her married name. Her husband, Paul, his family's original name was Berger. She was born in Ilona Fekete, but actually Schwartz before her parents changed their name to Fekete, which is a Hungarian word for black. She was born in 1906 in a town in the middle of what's now Romania, what was then Transylvania, part of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce the name of the town. She liked to brag for some reason throughout her life that she was born in the same year as the San Francisco earthquake, and which is how she pronounced it. So she was, and her family eventually in 1920 converted. They became Hungarian Lutherans, moved to Budapest, changed their name, and her parents, her father and her uncle reestablished their business in Budapest. I knew her obviously as an elderly woman. She came to our house every Sunday for dinner. She was a complicated, challenging person. She was quite fascinating. She was incredibly difficult. The working title of the book was Best Appreciated from Afar. She's been gone for a long time, almost 40 years. And I once tried to pitch a magazine feature about her to Walrus or Saturday Night, I forget. And they, sensibly said, no, why would we do a profile of somebody who's been dead for 30 years and doesn't have any claim to history or no particular claim to Canadian culture or anything. But the idea just sort of kept, it was alive in my mind. And so eventually I pitched Alana Wilcox, who says yes to way more things than she says no to. And the result is this book. So I'm going to read a very brief passage, which speaks to a bit to what Ilana was like. Ilana, I think, would be very surprised, possibly chuffed to be the subject of a book. She would also probably be kind of appalled to be a subject of a book about Jewish life in Hungary, and I'll tell you why in a moment. Before her decline, my grandmother was a character, but one best appreciated from afar. She had deep-set blue eyes and a penetrating, impassive gaze. Her short stature was accentuated by a pronounced hump. She boasted about her legs and wore sparkling, brightly colored dresses. Ilana loved men, especially those who were tall and good-looking, and she flirted well into her 80s. I witnessed this. Ilana gossiped, played cards, went to the horse races. She was a dedicated fan of the celebrity pianist Liberace. She spoke 5 languages. I don't remember her ever expressing any interest in politics, but she was fascinated by the extramarital affairs of Margaret Trudeau, then wife of Canada's Prime Minister. When she traveled, mostly by bus, Ilana installed herself in the lobbies of expensive hotels, where she watched the patrons and talked to anyone. For all her flamboyance, Ilana was also unfiltered and argumentative, No thought or opinion, no matter how ill-considered or odious, went unexpressed. She frequently made brazenly anti-Semitic remarks, which was perplexing because she herself was Jewish by birth and had married into a Jewish family. What's more, she criticized almost everyone around her, especially my mother, my uncle, and my sister. But Ilona liked me, and I, in turn, found her strangely fascinating. The summer after I turned 16, I worked in my uncle's Schmata factory, one of Toronto's first wholesale men's clothing warehouse outlets. One day, I noticed Ilona from a distance, walking towards the office for a visit, her high heels click-clacking on the concrete floor. The plant manager, Les, a Holocaust survivor with a world-weary manner and a number still visible on his forearm, stood nearby. "Here comes trouble," I said to him in a stage whisper. "What do you mean?" Les replied in his heavy Hungarian accent. "Look at her. She's just a sweet little old lady." "Les," I responded, "you have no idea." So what he had no idea of, besides all her eccentricities, is that she pulled off this remarkable survivor's, not trick, but she was an extraordinary survivor. I wouldn't be standing here if it wasn't for the things that she managed to do to protect my mother, my uncle, her husband for a while during the worst parts of the siege of Budapest in 1945. And then she did it all over again in the aftermath of the war when her family, they had nothing. And then did it all over again when she fled with her teenage son to Toronto, or to Montreal, in 1956, and then once more when she came to live in Toronto. So she was kind of an extraordinary person, best appreciated from afar. So I am really privileged to have had an opportunity to write about her life and all the other things around her.
Hello, I'm Mark Fryman, and I obviously need no introduction. Which is a good thing, because I'm here not for myself, but to introduce not one, but two winners of two fabulous books. The first is Ezra Glinter's biography of Menachem Mendel Schneerson, entitled Becoming the Messiah, a biography of the seventh Lubavitcher Rebbe. And Menachem Mendel Schneerson, whose visage on the right side of the slide, has become literally an iconic Jewish figure. The photograph you're looking at, which is on the cover of Ezra Glinter's biography, has become a meme signifying both the Hasidic movement that Schneerson led as Rebbe and the messianic beliefs and aspirations of most of his followers, including arguably himself. Ezra Glinter's admirable biography places the Rebbe within the intellectual context of Hasidism and the historical context of Eastern European Jewry. It follows him through his surprising studies in secular institutions in Berlin and in Paris that continued alongside his religious studies. It delves into the politics of leadership and succession within the Lubavitch Hasidic movement, and it goes into Schneerson's role in establishing Chabad Lubavitch in America and its distinctive ideology as the center of a worldwide Jewish outreach program with the Rebbe as its sage and sometimes messianic center. The Rebbe ready to delve into issues both narrow, of interest to individuals who come to seek his advice, and as wide as worldwide issues that presidents and prime ministers came to address. The result of this is a wide-ranging, highly readable, non-partisan work that allows the reader to understand the gifts, the accomplishments, and perhaps the limitations of a man who inspired widespread admiration both in the Jewish and the non-Jewish community as well, while at the same time igniting his own share of controversy. Neither hagiography nor polemic, this is a splendid introduction to a man, his time, his intellectual milieu, his challenges, and his distinctive responses to all of those. Ezra Glinter has written a book that is well worth everyone's attention.
Thank you to Mark, to Edward, to all the members of the jury, and everyone involved with the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards, to Lisa Roy and everybody here at the JCC. Also to my editor, Stephen Zipperstein, and everyone at Yale University Press who made this book possible. To my parents who may be watching at this moment, to my sister Leah and her partner Jameson who are in the audience today. I'm often asked what the experience of researching and writing this book was like. And there's not really a single answer to that question. But I want to speak just a little bit about one of the elements of this project that most fascinated me, and that was really the theology of the Rebbe of Menachem Mendel Schneerson, and the ideology that drove him and that inspired him to create, or not to create, but to lead the Chabad movement in the latter half of the 20th century, and to really turn it into the worldwide endeavor that I'm sure most of us are previously familiar with. Chabad, like all Hasidism, is essentially a doctrine of radical immanence, meaning that it emphasizes the presence of God in the world, and more than that, the identification of the world with God. To quote Martin Buber, Hasidism can be summed up in a single sentence: God can be beheld in each thing and reached through each pure deed. Chabad goes further than this, though, in many respects. It's a doctrine that is known in English as panentheism. That is distinct from pantheism. The world and God are not synonymous in this view, but the world is a part of God. To use Kabbalistic terminology, God is both Memale Kol Almin, he fills all worlds, but is also Solev Kol Almin, he surrounds all worlds. There's both the immanent and the transcendent aspect. And in certain of his formulations, Chabad goes further to the point where it could be termed a cosmicism, a certain belief that the world, in a certain respect, doesn't exist or isn't real in some way. Just to read a little bit, because it's easier to do that than to try to paraphrase these ideas on the fly. And I spent a long time trying to find the good words for them. So to quote myself, if you'll indulge me, if the question then becomes what the purpose of the world is, if it's all part of God, and the answer, one of the answers that Chabad teaches, is that the purpose of the world is for revelation. God cannot be revealed directly. It's impossible. Anything else could not exist in that situation, but the world places a veil, as it were, over God that allows God paradoxically to then be revealed. If the world is dependent on God for its existence, God too is dependent on the world. Although divinity is infinite and indivisible, it is incapable of self-revelation. So long as God remains alone, there is nothing to which he can be revealed. Yet full and unmediated revelation precludes the presence of anything else, which should be unable to maintain its existence in the face of overpowering divine brilliance. The purpose of the world, therefore, is to reveal divinity through the veil of creation. Paradoxically, the only way God can be revealed is by being concealed. By obscuring the divine light, creation allows it to shine. Following the Kabbalah, from which it drew many of its concepts and terms, Hasidism placed the Jewish people at the center of this purpose. It is the human task to the performance of the commandments and enactment of the divine will to reveal God's presence in the world. Now, many of you will know, and as Mark pointed out in his wonderful introduction, that among the more controversial aspects of Schneerson's work and leadership was his unrelenting messianism, to the point that many of his followers considered, and some still do consider him to be the Messiah, and his own position on that is, permanently vague. It's an unanswerable question, really. But you have to ask, I did ask, so what does it mean to be messianic in this case? What is the Chabad conception of the Messiah? So it actually follows directly from what I just mentioned. According to Chabad, the Messianic age signifies not just the repair of the world, but the ultimate revelation of the divine. Although it is axiomatic that direct, unmediated revelation is impossible, redemption allows for the transcendence of this impossibility. Just as God can accompany a unity of opposites, so can the Messianic state. Moreover, this ultimate revelation will not obliterate the world, but will take place within and through the world. Citing Isaiah chapter 40, verse 5, "And the glory of God will be revealed, and all flesh shall see together that the mouth of the Lord has spoken." Chabad teaches that in the Messianic era, the revelation of divinity will be perceived by all humanity through the physical senses. This idea that the Messianic age will constitute the ultimate union of the world and God received great emphasis from Schneerson, starting with his first discourse, in which he identified the return of the essential Shekhinah as the task of his generation. So this might all seem a little abstruse, but I bring it up now because this really was the most fascinating and fun part of this entire project. Learning this theology and understanding that this is in fact the core ideology, that when you see a Chabad representative on the street trying to put tefillin on people, or handing out Shabbos candles, or inviting you to a public menorah lighting, it is all for the purpose of achieving this end, of this world in which the divinity is manifest physically to all people in all places. Just to wrap up, again, thank you to everyone for coming today, and to the awards and to the jury. This is a great honor, and I appreciate you all. Thank you very much.
Careful scholarship illuminates its subject matter so as to reveal the underlying significance of the facts and the details it describes. Michael Beiser and Anne Comaroni's volume, A Time to Sow, provides an account of the Refusnik community in Leningrad during the period between the end of détente with the West and the beginning of the policy of perestroika. In other words, during the years when there was no realistic possibility of emigration from the Soviet Union. One of the major virtues of A Time to Sow is that it restores agency to the Soviet Jewish community. It dispels any notion of that community as passively waiting for external guidance or deliverance. Rather, it shows how it was they themselves who worked to establish a Russian Jewish identity during the years where they could not move, where they were neither welcomed at home nor were they able to move abroad. What the authors describe is a cultural political movement that was communal in nature, with its members looking inward, as it were, for support and direction. The authors carefully locate the stories of various refuseniks within the specific context of Soviet society at the time and the unique position of Jews in that society. What emerges is the story of how these refuseniks, in effect, created their own Russian Jewish identity where previously there was none. A movement that originally sought emigration as much because of economic realities as anything else, came to understand, as one refusenik put it, a free person needs to belong to some sort of group with shared traditions, with shared values, and shared worldview. A Time to Sow illuminates how the refuseniks of Leningrad went about creating that identity for mutual support, that identity for themselves through the establishment of an informal community for mutual support, Hebrew teaching, holiday observance, and the like. The great achievement of this book is to focus our attention not only on what these refuseniks resisted, but also on the identity that they built. It is a great accomplishment.
Thank you so much, Mark, for that very generous introduction. It's a great honor to be able to accept this award on behalf of my co-author, Michael Baser, and myself. We want to express appreciation to the CJLA jurors and the organization for drawing attention to our book and for encouraging the wide range of writing on Jewish topics that could include our work, A Time to Sow, along with the other distinguished books represented here today. We're humbled to be among the awardees this year. Michael and I began talking about doing such a book on refuseniks, who are called Atkazniki in Russian, not long after our first meeting in Jerusalem in 2007, when I was researching Soviet underground press and culture and the history of the Jewish national movement in particular. The history of refuseniks in Leningrad was Michael's own history. In the early 1980s, he led an unofficial historical seminar on Jewish topics, and he also led excursions around the city to show people sites and explain the suppressed Jewish history. Michael wanted me to mention the two people to whose memory we dedicated our book. One of them is Sir Martin Gilbert, British historian, official biographer of Churchill, who was one of the Western observers who became engaged and went to extraordinary lengths to support Soviet Jews. Borders were denied. Gilbert visited refuseniks, including Michael, in Leningrad. He wrote a book about the people he met, whom he called the Jews of Hope, Yevrei Nadezhdy. This was a riposte to the Jews of Silence by Elie Wiesel 20 years earlier, and he encouraged their scholarly efforts, the efforts of the refuseniks in their publications abroad. This was something that was hugely important for Michael and for others. Abba Taratuta was the other person to whom we dedicated the book. Abba died not too long ago in Haifa. It was an honor and a pleasure for me and my family to get to know him and his wife, Ida. They had been leaders among the refuseniks in Leningrad for many years before making Aliyah, arranging support for underground ulpans, for Hebrew learning, for seminars, community holidays, and samizdat, or self-published editions on Jewish topics. He inspired so many Soviet Jews through his personal example of choosing not to be afraid and telling people, don't be afraid. taking pride in Jewish culture and identity, gathering and encouraging people to gather at every opportunity with fellow Jews, and helping people to learn, to celebrate, and to create solidarity in Jewish community. After making Aliyah, he collected documents from the history of the movement and created an organization with a website called Remember and Save to share the knowledge about those who had been involved on both the Soviet side and the Western side, and to show the impact of what they had done. Because this is the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards, I want to mention that in the book, we briefly describe the visit of the Canadian parliamentary delegation to Refuseniks in 1984. And we note Irving Abella's attendance at a Yom HaShoah commemoration ceremony in Leningrad on April 17th, 1988. As we know from Wendy Eisen's valuable book, Count Us In, there was lots of Canadian participation in the movement to support Soviet Jewry. And more broadly, generations of Canadians, parents and kids, will remember how central the topic was to Jewish community life in the 1970s and 1980s in particular. This book is intended to shed more light on what those Soviet Jews thought, said, and did. Far from silent victims, and not only people in need of help, Soviet Refusnik activists manifested courage, resilience, creativity, and pride as Jews amidst a reigning culture of assimilation and anti-Semitism, both popular and official. In doing so, I dare say these Soviet Jews set an example that seems only more relevant to us today. I also want to take the opportunity to thank everyone at University of Toronto Press and our editor, Stephen Shapiro there, who helped make this book a reality. And I want to also thank the family that provided so much support for me and who are here today, my husband, Leonid, and daughter, Isabel, for coming and being with us to celebrate. Thank you.
It means so much to me to present the Canadian Jewish Literary Award in Yiddish to Anna Miransky for poem by poem, fable by fable, discovering my father and learning his language. Poem by poem, fable by fable does more than celebrate the life of her father, Peretz Miransky, one of Canada's foremost Yiddish writers. At the age of 72, Anna studied Yiddish to read her father's poetries and fable in what was her first and forgotten language. She not only discovers her father, but she also gains insight into the experience of being a Holocaust survivor, being a member of Young Vilna, the celebrated Yiddish literary group, and the thriving Yiddish cultural community in Montreal. In an astute literary analysis, she probes why Peretz Miransky had to write in fables to protect himself from harm, and why, as a Jewish writer, he chose the literary themes he did. Poem by poem, fable by fable, brings forward an understanding of the creative imagination and introduces the reader to remarkable poems and fables, both in Yiddish and in English translation. The book hit really close to home to me. My father, my parents were survivors who settled in Montreal after the Shoah. My father was born in Vilna and peripherally a part of Young Vilna. When he arrived in Montreal, my father joined the vibrant literary Yiddish community that Peretz Miransky became a part of. For my father, the new life was a love of Yiddish, poem by poem. Poem by poem, fable by fable is a biography, a literary analysis, a cultural history, and all these things add up to being a homage to the Yiddish Wort. So I want to congratulate Anna Miransky.
Thank you, first of all, to Canadian Jewish Literary Awards and the jury for this great honor.
I must acknowledge my good fortune in being given an extraordinary subject for my book and the raw materials for it by my father, Peretz Miransky. He was a Yiddish poet and fabulist who arrived in Canada in 1949 after surviving the Holocaust. He was a member of Young Vilna, the last important Yiddish literary group in Eastern Europe. There is a slide of Young Vilna, I believe, that could go up now. This is a photo of Young Vilna taken in 1935. My father was invited to join the group in 1934 when he was just 28, becoming its youngest member. And yeah, the circle around the head is my father. His first book of poetry and fables, composed almost entirely of work written before the war and reconstructed from memory, was published in Montreal in 1951. His books, 5 substantial volumes, were published except for one in Canada, making him not only a Yiddish poet, but a Canadian one as well. For most of my adult life, I sparred with my father and judged him as self-involved and not particularly interested in being a father. From a narrow perspective, those were not inaccurate labels, but I did not know my father well, in part because he was silent about and preoccupied with his pre-war life and massive losses, in large part because his language of communication, the language of his soul, was Yiddish and would remain so until the day he died. My first language was Yiddish, but I lost the ability to speak it around the age of 6 when I entered school. And so throughout my father's life and mine, ours was an imperfect communication, him speaking to me in Yiddish, in which I had only a child's vocabulary and understanding, and me answering him in English, in which he was less than proficient. Almost everything important to me about my father, I learned almost 30 years after his death. I learned it during the pandemic, when I decided to read every poem and fable in his 5 substantial volumes, lined up, mostly unread, on my bookshelf. The last of these came out in 1991, only 2 years before his death. Although it started as a pandemic exercise, the process of reading and digesting my father's work was life-changing. It required a commitment to developing my fluency in Yiddish and much consultation with my friend, the Yiddish scholar David Roskies. Because I am a psychotherapist accustomed to finding patterns, I noticed themes in my father's writing and organized the book into chapters reflecting some of those themes. One of the most important was my father's passion for Yiddish. There were numerous love odes to the language and to the Yiddish teachers and poets who inspired him, pre- and post-war. The prologue to his first book, A Licht für a Groschen, A Candle for a Penny, is an 8-line poem entitled Mein Lied, My Poem. I will read it in Yiddish first to give you a sense of the sound. Chotsch sis Ohren mein Lied, wie a Licht für a Groschen, schmelzt sich ones on Tisch von mein jiddischen Loschen. Nit bar Yiskor Ashor, nit lepone Makadish, nor an Kegen a Bräut und frisch Wasser a Ladish. Although my poem is poor, like a candle for a penny, I take pride in its Yiddish language and its place on the table. Not for appearance's sake, not as a memorial candle, but right next to a loaf of bread and a fresh jug of water. My father's mission, his life-sustaining passion, was the continuity of Yiddish literary culture. He saw himself as part of a great literary tradition, still in its youthful beginnings, still developing new forms of expression when it was severed from its creative home by the Holocaust, along with many of the authors and readers who wrote in and read the language. My father was invited to join Young Vilna as a fabulist. He participated in the reinvention of this ancient fable form and adapted it to write about modern concerns. He was inspired by a great Yiddish fabulist named Eliezer Steinberg. In Canada, he began to write what I came to call poetic fables, an innovative melding of poetry and fable. I will read one to give you a taste of his humor, his whimsy, and his spiritual wisdom. The first few lines in Yiddish, then the entire fable in English. It's entitled Brillen, Glasses. A Tate hat gebracht von Stott, trefft no, was kein Einfallen hat hatten, zwei Porsuenbrillen für beide Jaten. Father's brought 2 lovely toys for his twins, 2 little boys. What a joy, just what they want. Both the boys are jubilant. Frolicking outdoors, behold, the wonders of the world unfold. What a view, cries Elihu. Everything is blue, quite blue. Blue the earth, and blue the sky, even blue the butterfly. But laughing in a manner grim, Abella opposes him. Who says blue? From what I've seen, everything around is green, quite green. Green the field and green the inn. Even you are green, my twin. Father, likely for $1, bought sunglasses of 2 colors, with blue for Ellie, green for Bear. He sowed the seeds of trouble there. A bitter quarrel's being fought, each son giving what he's got. One says green, the other blue. The fighting wanes, then starts anew. Then, amid the slaps and scratches, each one breaks the other's glasses. The fighting stops. The 2 stand stunned, dazzled by a golden sun. My book is led by my father's poetry, but it is not a book of poetry translation. It is a melding of biography, memoir, psychology, and Yiddish literary history. It is also a very personal recounting of my changed relationship with my father as a result of reading his poetry. In the afterword of my book, I enumerate some of the things I learned from reading my father's poetry and fables. I'd like to conclude here by reading some of them. I learned from my father how important it is to have a dream, how a mission, no matter how tragic and impossible, can keep one alive. I learned about the unique artistic and spiritual beauty of Vilna. I learned about my father's literary peers and mentors. I learned about the sustaining power of a righteous cause. Most importantly, I learned about my father himself. In bearing his own soul, he helped to make mine more whole. Thank you to the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards and jury, and to all of you here for this opportunity to honor my father.
Next award is the Canadian Jewish Literary Award for Jewish Culture. Mashel Teitelbaum, Terror and Beauty, is compiled by Andrew Kear. It's a beautiful book. It's the winner of the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards for Jewish Culture. It features more than 200 reproductions of artworks from the full scope of Mashel Teitelbaum's career. Mashel Teitelbaum said about his work, "What I'm saying I'm painting, in effect, is the terror and beauty of life." Andrew Kear has compiled essays and reflections on the life and work of one of Canada's most talented artistic outsiders. Originally from Saskatoon, where his family home was a hub for the small but vibrant Jewish community, Mashel Teitelbaum, who died in 1985 at age 64, drew on his upbringing steeped in Hebrew school, Yiddish study, and Jewish youth activities. One essay in the book, The Mills of the Gods, The Impact of Judaism and War on Mashel Teitelbaum's art, highlights a painting depicting a bearded and burdened Jewish figure in a biblical landscape with a temple and palm trees. The meaning of Teitelbaum in Yiddish is palm trees at the end of a path, layering Jewish scenes and over a Canadian landscape. In an afterwork, Jim Shedden, the curator of special projects and directors of publishing at the AGO, says, Mashel was one of those figures that might possibly tell us something about Toronto. While it seems that people like Mashel might have become outsiders anywhere, it seems likely especially so in the relatively conservative Toronto. Again, on a personal note, I found out about the book that for years Mashel Teitelbaum lived at Avenue Road near Cottingham. I live on Cottingham near Avenue Road. His wife, Ethel Teitelbaum, was a founder and president of the Toronto Jewish Film Society right here at the Miles Mendel JCC. It's time that we knew more about the legacy of Mashel Teitelbaum. With Mashel Teitelbaum, terror and beauty, you do, and it's worth it. So thank you, Andrew Kear.
Thank you so much. It is a deep honor to receive this recognition from the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards. I'm humbled before such an illustrious jury and extend sincere thanks to them for their commendation. 2025 marks the 40th anniversary of Mashel Teitelbaum's passing in August 1985. For me, as a researcher, Teitelbaum proved a challenging but irresistible subject. He was a man for whom there was no room for small talk or small thought. His Ashkenazi roots trace back to Tsarist Russia, from where his father Max fled, escaping pogroms and political instability. Max was settled in Saskatoon by 1913, established West Side Dry Goods, and married Sarah Kilstein. Mashel Alexander was born in 1921. The Jewish population of Saskatoon was small and was subjected to the discriminations of the day, from quotas on memberships to the presence of a very brazen Ku Klux Klan. Early on, Teitelbaum faced the racial taunts of the schoolyard, but also made connections outside his family's close-knit Jewish community. He had a self-admitted inherent wildness. From the beginning, his attitude toward authority, especially institutional authority, was hard-bitten. Isaiah Berlin would have called him one of those properly tragic artists. The only thing which can be regarded as properly tragic, Berlin wrote, is resistance. Resistance on the part of a man to whatever it is that oppresses him. Teitelbaum was allergic to oppression, at times tragically so. He grew impatient of formal training, although this did not prevent him from studying with a number of artistic giants, including Clifford Still and Max Beckmann, and actually establishing an art studio himself later on. After the war, he eventually settled initially in Montreal, where he met and married his wife, Ethel Lintz, in 1952. And it sounds like people here know Ethel, and so you'll agree with me that she deserves her own biography, really. They moved to Toronto a year later, and it was in this city that Teitelbaum made his career and lived his 64 years. Teitelbaum's Jewish identity was formative. As a kid, he took classes in Hebrew and Yiddish and attended a Jewish youth group. He published his first artwork in the June 1934 edition of Young Israel. As a mature artist, Judaism was a key component of his cultural oxygen, a key term of reference. It emerges from his influences, whether it be the stark literary realism of Theodor Dreiser, psychologist Otto Rank's account of the human's creative impulse, stories and figures from the Hebrew Bible reclaimed from Rembrandt. For Elisa Shapiro, one of the 20 contributors to Terror and Beauty, God's Acre, which you see here, is the painting that underscores Teitelbaum's Judaic vision the best, I think. Completed in the aftermath of the atrocities of the Second World War, she describes a landscape of forsaken hope and justice unfulfilled. Quote, "The blue-white rays in this painting descend from the sky and never reach the barren earth with its abandoned wagon wheels." In the end, Mashel Teitelbaum was that rare soul who can unveil the thrum of life itself, his work always wavering between natural beauty and existential terror, becoming and suffering, substance and void. Terror and beauty would not have been possible without the cool-headed and enduring managing editors Jim Shedden and Robin Liu. And I also want to thank our publisher, Goose and Workbook. The Office of Gilbert Lee designed a book that honors the creative energy, weight, and power of Teitelbaum's art. There were many Mashel Teitelbaums, many faces and phases of the artist. A single perspective on his life and art would have been insufficient. And so very early on, it became clear that the book needed to be kaleidoscopic in perspective. So to all 20 of my fellow contributors, the book's talent legion, Margaret, Andrew, Alyssa, Sasha, Archie, Janet, Duke, Maya, Sky, Gary, Margot, Ehorn, Natalka, Jacob, Bernice, Sarah's Milroy, and Kale, John's, Sasaki, and Pilipchuk, thank you. And finally, I extend my sincere appreciation to the Teitelbaum family, Matthew, Sari, Mara, and the late Ethel Teitelbaum, for their deep trust in me and generosity. I hope we have made something important about the complicated man and artist you knew and loved. Thank you very much.
So, ladies and gentlemen, these are the Canadian Jewish Literary Award honorees for this year. Thank you for honoring the best in Canadian Jewish writing for 2025. A replay of this afternoon celebration gala will soon be available on the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards YouTube channel if you want to watch it again. As we celebrate the 11th anniversary of the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards, please reflect on its role as a pivotal event in the Canadian Jewish cultural calendar. A nonprofit organization, the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards annually recognizes and rewards the finest Jewish writing. These awards have not only uplifted our community, but also significantly contributed to Canada's literary landscape. You can join us in this celebration of Jewish literature by making a tax-deductible donation. We invite you to stand with us by supporting the Canadian Jewish Literary Awards. Together, we can uphold the rich tapestry of Jewish storytelling and affirm our enduring spirit. Click on how to donate on our website, cjlawards.ca. I want to thank Lisa Roy and the Miles Nadal JCC for hosting us so graciously. Thank you to the volunteers and the staff for their hard work in making this a memorable afternoon.
And so, it was our very great pleasure to spend time with you this afternoon. Mazel tov again to all the winners of this year's Canadian Jewish Literary Awards.